The passenger sensor. The I-94 was a black ribbon of nothingness at 3:14 a.m. I was 9 hours into a 12-hour haul, my eyes burning from the rhythmic flicker of white lines. The cabin of my sedan was a cocoon of blue dashboard light and recycled air. Then the chime started, a soft, rhythmic ding. I glanced at the dash. The passenger seatbelt warning was flashing red. I looked over. The seat was empty, just my cold coffee and a crumpled receipt. I reached over and shoved the bag off. The chime didn't stop. The sensor was persistent. It registered exactly 160 pounds of dead weight in the empty leather chair. I leaned over, my hands sweeping across the cold surface, feeling for a snag or a heavy object. Nothing, just the grain of the upholstery. The chime accelerated, a frantic heartbeat echoing through the speakers. I reached for the belt, pulled the strap across the void, and clicked it into the buckle. The silence that followed was heavy, a vacuum that made my ears pop. 5 minutes later, the climate control began to act up. My side of the dual-zone display was set to a steady 72 degrees. The passenger side, however, began to plummet. I watched the digital numbers tick down. 68, 60, 52, 40. A thin plume of frost began to form on the right side air vent. The air in the cabin shifted, smelling suddenly of stagnant water and old, wet wool. I reached out to sync the temperature, but the dial wouldn't budge. It felt like someone was holding it in place. The infotainment screen flickered. A notification popped up over my navigation map, obscuring the turnoff for the rest stop. New device detected. Unknown? My phone was already paired via Bluetooth, sitting in the center console. I hit ignore, but the prompt refreshed instantly. Attempting to pair. A high-pitched whine started coming through the tweeters in the doors, a frequency so sharp it made my molars ache. Then, the screen changed to the internal cabin camera feed. The night vision lens turned the interior into a ghostly green landscape. On the screen, I could see myself hunched over the wheel, eyes wide with fatigue. But the passenger seat wasn't empty on the display. The infrared sensor showed a heat signature, a shimmering, jagged outline of a person sitting perfectly still. Their head was turned toward me, a dark blur where the face should have been. I looked at the seat next to me. Empty. I looked back at the screen. The figure was leaning in. The car's active safety system engaged. The steering wheel jerked in my hands, the lane assist trying to pull me toward the shoulder. Obstacle detected. Internal, the dashboard flashed in urgent yellow. I fought the wheel, my knuckles white. The Bluetooth finally connected. The speakers didn't play music. They played a wet, rhythmic sound, like someone breathing through a throat full of fluid. "Get out," I whispered, my voice cracking. The passenger side door lock clicked, unlocked. The interior lights snapped on, blinding me. For a split second, I saw a reflection in the windshield that didn't belong to me. A pair of pale, elongated fingers were resting on the edge of the dashboard, right where the defrost vent was blowing freezing air. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming against the asphalt. The car skidded to a halt in the middle of the dark highway. The seatbelt chime started again fast, frantic, like a panic attack. The passenger belt retracted. It didn't just retract. It snapped back as if the weight had suddenly vanished. The temperature on the dash shot back up to 72 degrees instantly. The unknown device disconnected. I sat there in the middle of the road, the engine idling, my chest heaving. I reached over and touched the passenger seat. It wasn't just cold. The leather was damp. A dark, wet circular stain was sinking into the center of the cushion. I didn't wait to see if it would come back. I floored it. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit gas station 20 miles away. I walked around to the passenger side, my hands shaking as I opened the door. The seat was bone dry. No stain, no smell of wet wool. But when I got back into the driver's seat and started the engine, the infotainment screen didn't show the map. It showed a single text notification that had been sent from the unknown device to my own phone number. I opened it. The message was just one word: next. I traded that car in the following morning. The dealer ran a full diagnostic on the sensors and the OS, but they found nothing. Perfect condition, they said. I take the bus now. Sometimes when the bus is crowded and I'm standing in the aisle, I look at the empty seats near the back. I watch the request stop lights. Every now and then, on the late-night route, the light will chime for a stop where nobody is standing. I just keep my head down and wait for my turn to get off. The Smart Lane Phantom. The fog on Route 17 was thick enough to swallow my headlights whole. My 2026 SUV was doing most of the work. Its smart lane sensors hummed as they tracked the invisible lines on the asphalt. I was leaning back, coffee in hand, trusting the AI to get me to the next exit. Then, the dashboard turned a violent shade of amber. Proximity warning. Front. I squinted through the windshield. The road was a gray void. Nothing was there. Not a car, not a deer, not even a stray branch. The automatic brakes bit into the wheels, a sharp, grinding shudder that threw my coffee across the dash. The car didn't stop, but it slowed to a crawl exactly 15 miles per hour. On the digital display, a small gray icon appeared in the center of the lane. It was the pedestrian detected symbol. It was moving at a slow, rhythmic pace, directly in front of my bumper. I flashed my high beams. Still nothing but swirling mist and the black maw of the trees lining the highway. Clear path, I muttered, tapping the override button on the touchscreen. The car refused. Obstacle persistent. The screen flashed. I watched the icon on the radar. It wasn't just walking. It was erratic. It would stop, then dart to the left, then move back to the center. Each time it moved, the car's steering wheel twitched in my hands, trying to track the movement of a phantom. My heart began to thud against my ribs. The external thermometer started dropping fast. Then, the audio system glitched. The podcast I was listening to dissolved into a rhythmic, wet-slapping sound, perfectly synced with the movement of the icon on the screen. Slap, squelch, slap. It sounded like bare feet hitting wet pavement. I reached to turn the volume down, but the slider was stuck at maximum. The cabin lights flickered from blue to a dull, sickly red. Internal error, the voice assistant whispered, but the voice wasn't the standard female A. It was rasping. I looked at the rear view camera feed on the dash to see if anyone was behind me. The camera showed the empty road fading into the fog, but there was something wrong with the digital overlay. A set of handprints, glowing hot white and infrared, were pressed against the back window from the outside. They were long, the fingers tapering into points that looked like needles. I slammed my foot on the gas, trying to force the engine to ignore the sensors. The car screamed in protest. The autopilot gave up. The steering wheel went limp, and the car began to drift toward the guardrail. I grabbed the wheel, but it felt like I was fighting a pair of invisible hands. The passenger side window began to fog up from the inside, a word being traced into the condensation by a finger I couldn't see. LP. I turned my head, my breath hitching. The seat was empty, but the leather was depressing, sinking in as if someone or something was kneeling on it. The car's Face ID sensor, the one meant to track driver fatigue, started chirping. A green box appeared on the screen, but it wasn't framed around my face. It was hovering 3 inches to my right, locked onto the empty air of the cabin. Driver 2 identified. Unknown, the screen read. The seat heaters on the passenger side surged to high. I could smell burning hair and ozone. The high-pitched whine from the speakers reached a deafening crescendo, then suddenly cut to dead silence. The car stopped dead. The electronic parking brake engaged with a mechanical whine that sounded like a scream. All the doors unlocked at once. The dome light stayed off, leaving me in total darkness. I reached for my phone, but the screen was black, showing only a reflection of the back seat. In the glass, I saw a figure sitting directly behind me. It had no face, just a smooth, pale surface where features should be. It reached forward, its long, needle fingers brushing my neck. I didn't think. I threw the door open and tumbled out onto the wet asphalt, sprinting into the fog. I ran until my lungs burned, my boots splashing through puddles. I didn't look back until I saw the dim glow of a gas station sign a mile down the road. I called the police from the attendant's landline. When they found my car, the engine was still idling. The doors were wide open. The interior was pristine, except for one thing. The internal camera lens had been painted over with black grease. The police called it a systemic software failure. They claimed the grease was a prank from a previous owner that finally leaked. I knew better. I checked the Dashcam cloud save before selling the car for parts. The night vision footage didn't show the road. It showed the cabin's final 30 seconds. It caught me jumping out at speed. Then, the driver's seat began to slide forward on its own, adjusting for someone much, much taller than me. The mirror link glitch. The digital rear-view mirror was the first thing I upgraded in the van. It replaced the glass with a high-def camera feed, giving me a crystal-clear view of the road behind the rear doors. At 2 a.m. on the fog-choked turnpike, the screen flickered. The cars behind me vanished for a split second, replaced by a view of a sun-drenched desert road. Then it snapped back to the dark highway. I tapped the screen, thinking it was a wiring short or a cache error from a previous trip. The glitch returned, but this time it stayed. The screen showed the road behind me, but the weather was different. In the mirror, it was raining heavy, gray sheets of water that blurred the horizon. I looked out my side windows at the bone-dry asphalt and the clear, starry sky. The mirror link was showing a reality that didn't exist. I watched a car pass me in the reflection, a rusted black sedan with no license plate. In the real world, the lane next to me was empty. The black sedan in the mirror began to gain on me. I sped up, my foot heavy on the gas, but the ghost car kept pace, its headlights flickering like dying candles. On the screen, the sedan's driver's side door opened at 70 miles per hour. A figure leaned out, its skin the color of wet ash, reaching toward my back bumper. I looked at my physical backup camera, nothing. I looked back at the digital mirror. The figure was now standing on my rear bumper, staring into the lens. The smart safety sensors in the van began to scream. Rear collision imminent. The steering wheel vibrated, trying to pull me away from a car that wasn't there. The audio system cut out, replaced by a wet slapping sound against the back doors, like a giant piece of raw meat hitting metal. I checked the mirror again. The figure's face was pressed against the camera lens. It had no eyes, just two jagged, cauterized holes that pulsed with a faint, sickly yellow light. Identify device, I shouted at the voice assistant. The screen glitched, the mirror link feed stretching and warping until the figure's face filled the entire display. Device identified. The passenger, the AI replied in a distorted mechanical tone. The internal locks on the back doors cycled click-clack faster and faster. The cabin temperature plummeted. I could see my own breath frosting the dashboard. The figure on the screen tapped on the glass. The tapping didn't come from the speakers. It came from the physical metal of the van's floorboards, right beneath my feet. Tap, tap, tap. I looked at the mirror link again. The figure was gone from the bumper. It was now sitting in the middle of the road, receding into the rain. But the camera feed didn't show the road anymore. It showed the interior of my van, looking from the back doors toward the driver's seat. It showed me and a second, taller shadow sitting directly behind my head. I didn't look back. I knew that if I made eye contact with the physical reflection, it would be over. I slammed the shifter into neutral and yanked the emergency brake, sending the van into a violent, spinning skid across the 3-lane highway. The digital mirror shattered, the LCD screen bleeding black ink across the dashboard. The sound of the passenger screaming filled the cabin, a sound like metal being ground in a blender. Then, the van hit the soft grass of the median and flipped. I woke up hanging from my harness, the smell of gasoline thick in the air. The van was a total loss, resting on its roof in the dark. I crawled out of the broken windshield, my hands bleeding. I looked back at the wreckage. The digital mirror was hanging by a single wire, still glowing with a faint, static-filled light. On the cracked screen, a single line of text was scrolling over and over. Connection lost. Searching for new host. Searching ... I ran toward the nearest emergency phone. The insurance company wrote it off as a hardware malfunction. They said the camera had probably caught a loop of old footage. I didn't tell them that I'd never driven in the rain or a desert. I bought an old truck after that one with a glass mirror and manual windows. No screens, no AI, no link. But sometimes when I'm driving at night, I see a rusted black sedan in the distance. It never catches up, but it's always there, waiting for the light to hit the glass just right. Gemini said, I checked my cloud gallery a week later. A new 5-second clip from the crash was there. It didn't show the wreck. It showed the empty driver's seat after I'd crawled out. A long gray hand reached from the shadows, picked up my dropped sunglasses, and placed them on the dash. Then, a voice whispered from the phone speaker, "See you at the halfway mark." I deleted the account and threw the phone in the river. The dashcam ghost. The dashcam in my truck didn't just record the road. It had a collision predictive AI that highlighted potential hazards in green boxes. Driving through the Ozarks at midnight, the screen was a sea of black, except for the tiny green square tracking a moth near the glass. Then, a massive green box appeared in the middle of the highway, 300 yards ahead. It labeled the hazard as pedestrian, stationary. I squinted. The road was empty. I didn't slow down at first. Sensors glitch in the fog all the time. But as I got closer, the green box didn't vanish. It started to grow. The AI began to sublabel the target. Height, 7'4". Heart rate, 0 BPM. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the AC. I slammed on the brakes, the rig's airlines hissing as I came to a halt 50 feet from the target. To my naked eye, there was nothing but asphalt. On the screen, a man was standing directly in front of my grill. The smart display glitched, the green box flickering to red. Collision imminent, the speakers blared. The figure on the screen didn't move, but the AI skeletal mapping feature kicked in. A white digital stick figure appeared over the empty road, showing a person with their arms raised, fingers splayed against my hood. I heard a dull thump against the metal. The truck rocked back on its suspension, as if a weight had just jumped onto the bumper. I reached for my heavy-duty flashlight and shined it through the windshield. The beam cut through the dark, reflecting off the chrome of the grille. Nothing. I looked back at the dashcam monitor. The digital skeleton was now leaning over the hood, its face inches from the glass. The AI labeled the new movement. Aggressive intent detected. Then, the Face ID sensor for the cabin chirped. A second red box appeared, framing the empty space of my passenger seat. User 2 identified. My mother's name. My blood turned to ice. My mother had been dead for 6 years. I looked at the seat. It was empty, but the seat heater light clicked on. On the dashcam screen, the figure outside was screaming. I could see the digital mouth mapping widening, but no sound came through the glass. Instead, the radio turned itself on, playing a recording of a phone call from 2020. It was her voice, crying, telling me to watch the road. The figure outside smashed its fists against the windshield. I didn't see cracks, but the dashcam screen showed the glass spider webbing in digital purple lines. Structural integrity, 0%, the computer warned. The passenger seatbelt snapped shut on its own, locking into the buckle with a violent clack. The internal red box started moving toward me. I realized the AI wasn't glitching. It was seeing two things that my human eyes were physically incapable of processing. I threw the truck into reverse, the backup camera snapping on. The rear screen was a nightmare of red boxes, dozens of them. A whole crowd of stationary pedestrians were standing behind my trailer, blocking the way. The AI was labeling them all: family, friend, coworker. Names of people I hadn't seen in decades popped up in white text over the black road. They weren't moving. They were just ... waiting. I was trapped between the screaming thing on my hood and the silent crowd behind me. The Yotto drive took over. The steering wheel spun wildly as the truck tried to navigate a safe path through the crowd of ghosts. I pulled the manual override, but the handle snapped off in my hand like it was made of dry clay. The dashcam screen turned blood red. System overload, reality conflict. The engine revved to the red line, and the truck launched forward straight through the screaming figure on the hood. I felt no impact, no bump, no sound. The green and red boxes vanished instantly. The road was empty again. I drove for 3 hours without blinking, the radio silent, the seatbelt still buckled over an empty seat. When I finally reached a truck stop, I climbed out to check the front of the rig. There was no blood, no dents. But there, in the thick layer of road salt and grime on the hood, were 2 perfect human handprints. They were small. They matched the heart rate 0 signature perfectly. I pulled the SD card from the dashcam and tried to play it on my laptop. The file was corrupted, except for the final frame. It wasn't a picture of the road. It was a selfie mode shot of the cabin from the internal camera. It showed me at the wheel, looking terrified. And sitting next to me, buckled into the passenger seat, was a shimmering, transparent figure with its hand on my shoulder. The file name was simply safearrival.exe. I never drove that route again.